but it's Wednesday, March 25th, and we're kicking off the show today. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. In progress, Scott is the anchor of the Scott McFarland Reports and chief Washington correspondent for the Midas Touch Network. Hi, Stanton, Virginia. Almost said Staunton, Virginia. I'm like Stanton, Virginia.
There you go.
And Scott and I were just talking about the fact that he once worked for WRC, the NBC O&O in Washington, D.C., which is also my alma mater, as CBS was. And he recently covered Congress and the Justice Department for CBS News, reporting on the State of the Union addresses, elections, Supreme Court hearings, and legal cases involving Donald Trump. So it's a real pleasure to meet you, Scott, and welcome to the world of independent media. I know that you left CBS News pretty recently, and you shared in a note to colleagues, which said in part, "I want to personally let you know that my work will soon no longer appear on CBS News. This is my decision, and I appreciate the bosses at CBS for understanding it. I will always value the opportunity I had to work alongside the talented and committed professionals here, and I'm proud to have had the word CBS correspondent next to my name and always will be." Can you tell me a little bit more about your decision, Scott, to leave CBS and what fueled it?
Was not an easy decision. And I should add, Katie, 'cause it's important for you to know, on January 24th, I was anchoring the evening news that night, and there is a picture of Katie Couric above the desk next to Maurice Dubois, my North Star, John Dickerson, Scott Pelley, Jeff Glor, Dan Rather, Walter Cronkite, and Bob Schieffer, and Katie Couric front and center. So you have to sit beneath that picture and that legacy to sit in that desk and anchor the evening news. But it meant a lot to me to be next
Well,
to your
you're
phone.
very nice to say that. That was a very interesting 5 years for me, which we can talk about over a martini sometime.
Yeah, yeah. That's the time I spent there as well, about 5 years, and it was a dynamic time. It was the Trump post January 6th insurrection prosecutions, and then it was the resurgence, the reemergence of Trump himself. I left CBS March 14th, which I'm doing the math is, I guess it's about almost 2 weeks ago. And a few days later, I started at Midas Touch as Washington correspondent. It's hard to leave, colleagues you love. I mean, and you remember this from NBC and CBS. You really do develop these bonds you cannot find anywhere else. It's unique bonds you form in a newsroom when it's
Yes.
deadline pressure, when it's a team functioning on adrenaline. There's a unique bond you can't replicate. But it's clear where this is headed. Speaking one-on-one, communicating news conversationally without the bells and whistles and nonsense that television kind of as a cliche still maintains, um, it's much easier. It's much smoother. And I think the audience wants it much more this way. And I was finding that on my personal social platforms, I was getting so much engagement when I made it less formal, when I
Mhm.
just propped the phone up against a wall and talked into it, no matter the sound quality, no matter the lighting, the engagement would go up. And I was trying to read the room on that, Katie, and I saw if less formality, more declarative conversationalism is what the audience wants, maybe this is a lane I got to get into. And so then it became from a hard decision to quite an easy decision, realizing where news is going.
How obviously linear television news, broadcast news is declining. It has been for some time, Scott. But I'm curious how much of the impetus came from a change in philosophy and leadership at the top of CBS News. I've been pretty vocal, concerned about sort of the financial motivations, wanting the merger to go through, the Ellisons, bringing in Barry Weiss from the Free Press to ostensibly make the coverage more balanced or objective. And I would argue that it was balanced and objective, and that you all always were reporting the facts. But given this change in leadership, um, I'm curious how that felt for you as a CBS journalist to see that happening, and what concerns you might have had.
It was predictable as all get out that there's going to be at some point disruptive change. You're in linear media in 2026. You cannot just keep doing the same things and expect to survive or have a strong future. So I'm not surprised that a disruptor was brought in to CBS News. I can tell you without equivocation, never once did anybody put a heavy hand on anything I was doing. Never once was one of my scripts changed. Never once was I told cool it with how you're saying this or how you're saying that when you're in those unscripted platforms like streaming and radio and affiliate work. Nobody ever tried to interfere editorially. Um, I do wonder in a broader sense, though, Katie, is what are the linear media outlets from the local TV station like in Tulsa to the radio station in Seattle to a TV network like CBS? What are they going to do to arrest this independent journalism wave that is forming? How do you stop it or how do you get ahead of it? And I'm not sure what the answer is in any form of linear media. I found that concerning.
I'm not talking, yes, I agree. And the delivery system and responding and adapting to how getting news and information has changed dramatically and has been for some time. I was always frustrated at CBS that they weren't leaning into digital news. And this was back in 2006 to 2011. So, I've always urged being an earlier adapter. But there's sort of two issues we're talking about here, Scott. One is the delivery system. One is how you package news and information and meet people where they are in a more kind of palpable way. But the other is philosophically. And I know you covered January 6th. And I also know that when the CBS Evening News covered January 6th most recently, the anniversary, they gave it very little time, and it was very much a both sides approach. Republicans were feeling this way, Democrats were feeling this way. Now, according to reports, you were put off by that. And I'm just curious. So I'm talking, let's take the delivery system and adapting to change aside. I want to talk to you about philosophically what was happening and what continues to happen at CBS News under the Ellisons and Barry Weiss. How did you feel about that, Scott?
I have a broader concern about this January 6th both sidesism. I don't think it's limited to any one news outlet. I
Well,
don't think it's any one group.
I do think that CBS has made a concerted effort to be more accommodating to Donald Trump at certain instances. For example, I'm sorry that I'm just going to grill you on this, Scott, but
Okay.
they basically canceled or postponed the 60 Minutes piece on CCOT. There were other examples where the anchor of the CBS Evening News basically was saying, Florida man Mark Rubio, which was kind of questionable, honestly. Let's be clear about that. There have been just moments where it seems like CBS is attempting to bend over backwards, not in all instances, by the way. They have also been very critical of the Trump administration, but there have been instances where people are like, this feels off and this feels like we're accommodating an administration because we want a merger to go through and our business goals are more important than our journalistic ones. Have at it.
It's a really good question, and I embrace the chance to talk about it because I've been talking about it at home a lot, and maybe at home they're done listening to Dad have conversations about this
Well,
topic.
treat this like your living room.
Thank you. I was on CBS News a whole bunch on January 6th, 2026. We have all these platforms. Our streaming platform was very ambitious and gave me a lot of runway to talk about January 6th. Plenty there. I had custom talkbacks every week with our affiliate stations. That was a priority of mine because I came up from local news and loved to be in local newsrooms. Talked about it a bunch there. On radio, I think every hour on the hour I talked about it. Now, the CBS Evening News did not have me on that night. And that's a dynamic you remember. And sometimes that was a dynamic you had your fingerprints on. There's only so much bandwidth in those broadcasts. And there's a lot of correspondents who think they have something very important to say, very important context to give that don't get the opportunity that night. That's true at the nightly news. It's true on ABC. It's true in so many different ways. I didn't get on the air that night about January 6th. If I had, I would have said all the things I've been saying before and after that broadcast. January 6th is a kinetic, ongoing story. It's not a piece of history. It is a current day danger and toxicity and cancer inside of our politics, and it needs attention. But I hold no grudges for not being on the broadcast that night
Well,
because
how
it
do
was a
you
busy
feel?
news.
Well, let me be more specific. How do you feel about the way it was covered?
I watched back the 16-second clip of that night, and what occurred to me is you can't do this story in any way, shape, or form in 16 seconds. I mean, there's no fair way to do that story in 16 seconds because there's a lot of baggage with that story, and um, there may have been some strong intentions to get this information out there. But 16 seconds is not the lane that January 6th is best told in, and that's
What about
just the reality.
the both sides nature of how it was covered?
I heard people call it both sides. I've heard the both sides of January 6th elsewhere. It has a different flavor and connotation. Both sides is when you call them political prisoners. Both sides is when you call them hostages. Both sides is when you say this wasn't a riot, that this was some type of peaceful protest or a day of love, as the president has previously called it. Both sides is when you claim those who beat police didn't beat police. I hear all that. Katie, I hear that on a daily basis in my feeds from the people who still engage on this. That wasn't a component of the CBS Evening News that night. That was not the both sides I am accustomed to. I tell you, the talented people at CBS are there and have been there for decades, and I suspect they're going to be there a long way into the future because it is the best writers, best producers, best editors, best people in class in television news. And I grew so much being with them.
Did you sign an NDA by chance?
I I'm not sure I've ever signed an NDA, other than the fact that I think at one point, at at one point in college radio, I had to promise not to tell about the format change we were we were about to undergo.
Are you concerned or have you noticed, let me put it that way, a change of tone and approach at CBS News writ large? Not with your reporting, Scott, not with anybody instructing you specifically, but have you noted a change in tone? And if so, are you concerned about it?
I haven't noticed that, didn't have visibility on any of that. And I'd say so if I did, because I am now liberated by a place where I have an unfiltered editorial control, which is one of the inviting things about the Midas Touch Network. They have given me unfiltered ability to just report. I didn't see that. But what I did see is the macro. It's the thing that is outside of CBS, where I couldn't get on the air certain nights with things that were important. And a lot of correspondents chronically shared that concern, but that doesn't help with sourcing, and that doesn't help with you finding the way to get information to people in the best mechanism possible. I felt like this was a better fit.
I know that Oliver Darcy. Hold on, I'm just writing to my team to get you the. I'm going to read the transcript of what was reported that night and get your reaction because I
I
don't have
do,
it.
I do like the comments about Katie is skeptical, and so am I, because it, it's an honest reaction, and I kind of like this interaction, the ability to get instant feedback from people about what you're saying, and this is why this is such a wonderful platform.
It is, and I have a lot of really smart followers who care deeply about democracy and freedom of the press. So that's why I think they appreciate me grilling you about this.
Yeah.
You know, they reported Oliver Darcy's newsletter status reported that the relaunched CBS Evening News is on track for its lowest rated first quarter since 2000. Even lower than my ratings, everyone. Um, in both total viewers and the advertiser coveted 25 to 54 demo. The morning show is also down year over year. Is there, I mean, is there a lot of concern within in the building? I haven't worked there since 2011, and most of the people I know haven't. But for example, Mary Walsh, a longtime producer, as you probably know, Mary Walsh of Face the Nation, left and said they want us to. I forget Mary Walsh's exact quote, but basically they want us to treat people. I'm going to find it because I want to be accurate here. Uh, and
I think it was a point of
okay,
view,
here
and I
it
don't know how to
goes.
do that. Is that right?
Yeah, she said. Hold on. I've got to find this. Sorry, everyone. Thanks for your patience. Uh, we've been told to aim our reporting at a particular part of the political spectrum.
That's
Honestly, I don't know how to do that.
I wasn't asked to do that. And I think if you watch the work back I did in the final weeks at CBS News, I was as frank and conversational as ever. But that's because I'm trying to flex the muscle that I think independent journalists have, which is you just call it like you see it and you just say it clearly and plainly. And if somebody tried to force you to ascribe a political point of view or a political motive, I don't think it would resonate as authentic. And I'm not sure that would ever work. So I haven't seen that happen, nor do I think that would ever be possible. Because if you're not authentic and you're championing somebody else's philosophy, somebody's going to see that a mile away. The reason you succeeded and continue to succeed is people see the genuine you. If you try to put on airs or fake it, people can sniff that out in a second. And I
But
think that doesn't work. I can't imagine anybody would ever be asked to do that.
what Mary is saying, Scott, is that we've been told to aim our reporting at a particular part of the political spectrum. In other words, to reduce, I think it means to appeal more to center right. In other words, suggesting that the people at at the CBS Evening News, hi, Congressman Raskin, I'm happy to have you here. I'll be talking to you momentarily. That somehow they should pull their punches when criticizing the president and being less critical of the administration. And I guess I'm going to get off this now, but did you ever get the sense, or was it ever communicated to you, as it was to Mary Walsh, we need to aim our reporting at a particular part of the political spectrum? Did you get that message from the leadership at CBS News?
Never, nor would I have stayed for that. As Rhonda Foster asks, I did leave voluntarily. They were gracious enough to accept my decision. At a time, it was very busy at the Department of Justice when I left, and I was the Justice Department correspondent. But I didn't. I don't think I really, Katie. I think that's fan fiction to assume that people are trying to politically target somebody on the spectrum and go get him, because I don't think anybody knows how to do that. I mean, that doesn't seem, there can't be a plan for how to go. We want to find those, that 10% of purple right conservative Stark County, Ohio,
Mm.
Macomb County, Michigan people. The politicians may have a strategy for reaching those people, but television news does not. There's no formula that works for that, which is why I don't think that was ever an actual prescribed plan.
What do you think Barry Weiss's edict is at CBS News, besides updating it and adapting to a more modern delivery system?
Yeah, she makes the point that news cannot be a commodity and be monetizable in broadcast television. You can't just be telling people things they already have on their phone. You can't be telling things people saw with Katie at 3:30 Eastern Time, 12:30 Pacific on Wednesday. You're going to have to tell them things that are enterprise exclusive, or at least provide unique context. That has absolutely the correct ethos. How you find the people who are uniquely qualified to do that is an ongoing process. I felt that the best way to get information that is not commoditized is to go right to people and not have to go through waiting for a certain time of day, waiting for a certain type of news cycle. Just say it. And I think you're capitalizing it just the same way on finding a way to present Congressman Raskin in a way that cable and television just won't do tonight.
Let me ask you, and then as Julia, my producer, writes a transcript of that 16-second read on the anniversary of January 6th, what do you think is going to happen if the merger goes through, and it looks as if it's likely will, and executives at Paramount, Skydance, and the news people they have hired take over CNN? What do you think is going to happen, Scott?
Let me address, and I see the comments coming in, and I'm not immune to them. I do see that there may be some concern about question avoidance or about trying to water things down. You got to have to recognize the hierarchy of broadcast television. Those of us working in a bureau as a reporter, we're not in the management meetings. Katie, we're not there around the table where the top decisions are made. Sometimes the news comes to you in an email. Sometimes
No,
the news comes
but
to you
in
in a
fairness,
memo.
Scott,
Yeah.
in fairness, a mandate or somebody's efforts are telegraphed and communicated to the organization as a
Yeah.
whole. So
Yeah.
you're not totally in the dark.
Well, in terms of the future forward-moving editorial strategy, yeah, I am, because I'm not there. I think the mergers in the industry are a particular risk to local news. I think that's where the concern is. I've got grave concerns about what happens in cities like Macon, Georgia, Poughkeepsie, New York, um, Toledo, Ohio. Is there enough out there to continue to provide local news, local
Well,
sports, local meetings?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Yep.
especially with the Tegna Nexstar merger, because now instead of having 39% of the nation's local stations, they have 80%. And of course, Tegna, it was Nexstar was the one that continued to keep Jimmy Kimmel off the air.
Yep.
So they lean conservatively. But you didn't really answer my question about CNN. Sorry to come back to that. What do you
No,
think
no,
is
go
going to
ahead.
happen?
Oh, it does seem to me CNN has the incredible blocking and tackling of breaking news that seems like it would marry well with those remarkably artistic Sunday shows on CBS, which drive a huge audience. You think Sunday morning, 60 Minutes, which you were a big contributor for. It does seem like there's a lot of mutual benefit there, right? Like you could see how one part matches well with the other. Although when you start matching one part with another, you know what happens next. You start slicing out parts of that pie.
It also, I mean, it will be interesting to see ideologically if CNN is going to start appearing more like Fox, if it's going to
Mhm.
try to change its tone and its approach. And I guess, well, that remains to be seen. Just because I mentioned it, this is what Tony DeCopel said at the 5-year anniversary of January 6th. 5 years after the January 6th attack, a group of pardoned defendants marched through Washington. President Trump today accused Democrats of failing to prevent the attack on the Capitol, while House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries accused the president of, quote, whitewashing it. Political forecaster and founder of UVA's nonpartisan Center for Politics and a personal friend of mine, Larry Sabato, tore into DeCople in a series of posts on X, Twitter, saying goodbye to the broadcast forever. In a quote, in a brief, both sides are equal report on January 6th at the end of the CBS Evening News, the anchor said President Trump accused, anyway, he repeated what I just did. President Trump accused Dems of failing to prevent the attack. Hakeem Jeffries accused Trump of whitewashing it. Shameful. My family watched CBS and Cronkite from 1963 on. No more, sadly. That's the way it is. January 6th, 2026. And political scientist and Atlantic contributing editor Norm Ornstein, who I worked with when I was at CBS, he was one of our
Contributor.
political
Yeah.
producers,
Yeah.
called the segment disgraceful and disgusting. So you're fine with the way that was characterized?
I think if you're going to take 16 seconds, you're setting yourself up for trouble on this topic. I don't think there's a both sides. I don't think there's any reason to equivocate about it being a whitewashing. It is a whitewashing. There was no blame for anybody but those who attacked the Capitol or incited that attack. And if you want to talk about telling the story of January 6th in 16 seconds, you put a very high hurdle, but let me tell it in 16 seconds. It's been 5 years. Half of Congress will not acknowledge January 6th happened. 5 years later, they're still fighting to put a little plaque on the wall to honor the police officers, which Congressman Raskin's going to get done and did get done in recent days. And 5 years later, the absolute animosity that was fomented on January 6th and exacerbated by the pardons continues to be a toxin in a stalemated Congress. They got to get past January 6th before they can fix the other stuff.
Is so if that's how you would characterize it, you're telling me that this read that the anchor of the CBS Evening News did on the 5th anniversary of January 6th, a day that many believe will live in infamy, a day that, there's no excuse for what happened that day. No pardons should have ever been meted out to all people who participated. You're saying that that didn't bother you and that was not, it did not contribute to your decision to leave CBS News.
Oh, didn't contribute to my decision to leave CBS. I'm more bothered by the macro here. The pardons happened, and half of America is working under the mindset that it didn't happen. The riot didn't happen, that there is a both sides to this, that you do
Or it
have
was a day of love.
a day of love, or that it was somebody's fault besides the insurrectionists and those who inspired them and directed them. There's the person who was deemed responsible for January 6th. There were 1,500 plus riot defendants, and the president was charged with a crime that had January 6th as a component. The electorate has decided that that is not relevant right now. And I think for the victims, for the police I know, for the police families I know, for the congressional staffers hiding beneath tables, that it has been both sides is outrage and a re-aggravation, and Katie, a re-traumatization of a group that includes several police officers' families for officers who died by suicide because of that day.
So do you believe it's beneath the CBS Evening News to characterize it as such?
I think it's beneath the media to continue to platform people who deny January 6th was what it was. And it's not any one organization. That's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about putting this on the micro, Katie, because it's not that one broadcast. You know it's not. You see it everywhere. You see the president continue to say the 2020 election was rigged, which, by the way, raises the prospect of another, January 6th like response when elections are lost.
I
And
see it
I
everywhere on social
far and
media, Scott.
wide.
I don't see legitimate news organizations giving credence that it was a day of love or that, it didn't happen or wasn't that bad. I don't see legitimate news organizations giving that credence. I don't.
Is the silence worse? Is the silence worse when if you have a certain, news outlet that just won't talk about it, that just won't address it? They both have their own problems. And I think if you look back to January 6, 2026, and if you look back to January 6, 2025, when Republicans also did not hold any services or memorials for January 6th, the silence was deafening. It wasn't There were some broadcasts that didn't touch on it at all, and that bothers me. It's a kinetic part of America. It's a current problem. We have to talk about it.
Well, tell me about what you're excited about being a more independent voice in the media landscape and what you'll be focused on, Scott.
And Rhonda Foster, again, is on top with prescient comments. I see she is absolutely spot on every time I look up. I think the ability to do the opposite of what you and I were just talking about. I can have a extended conversation about what's happening today and why political violence, the circumventing of democracy and separation of powers, the ongoing threat of January 6th and other denialists of the 2020 election are relevant and important, and what news is being made on that front. I'm going to do it tonight. We'll put it on YouTube. We'll talk about the January 6th plaque, the important day it is today for that, which Congressman Raskin will likely address later. The limitless bandwidth really is inviting.
And will you continue to cover the Justice Department? You are going to be covering the midterms. And the Democrats are having, do you want to just tell our viewers how much success the Democrats are having in flipping both state legislative seats and congressional seats?
Yeah, according to my latest reporting, which is this thing changes minute by minute, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee now has 44 Republican held seats they think are in play in November. They'd need to flip about three or four to can guarantee the majority. So they have 44 they're looking at, three or four they think would be necessary to win it. And if you want an indication of where this is going, they're winning these state house races in Republican held districts too. It could be a canary in the coal mine, could be a beta test of what's to come, but they haven't gotten through their primaries yet. And who wins the primary to go towards November is going to be important. Is it the right political complexion for that district? And there's a lot of time between now and November. If gas prices go back down, if Iran were to shift to low throttle, things can change, but they have every reason to be bullish. And I'll tell you, if I were a Republican in a district Donald Trump won by less than 15 points, I'd raise more money. If I was a Democrat thinking about running for Congress in a red district, this would be the year to do it.
I want to mention that the special elections in Florida, just so people know, in the state Senate District 14, which is the Tampa Bay area, Democrat Brian Nathan, a union leader and Navy veteran, narrowly won a special election in a district that Donald Trump had won by more than 7 points in 2024 and had voted Republican by nearly 10 points in 2022. In House District 87, Palm Beach County and Trump's home district. Yes, it includes Mar-a-Lago. Democrat Emily Gregory defeated the GOP candidate by 2 points in a district Republicans had won by 19 points in
Do you
2024.
want the good news or bad news for Democrats in that?
Well, go ahead and do the bad news
So, see, you're like my kids.
because
They
I
always want the
think
bad
that's the
news
good
first.
news.
Why do my kids want the bad news first all the time? I would be opposite. All right. Bad news in Florida for Democrats who may have some aspirations. They're going to redraw the lines. Florida's Republicans are going to redraw the lines in Florida to make sure that dynamic last night is not a problem for them in November. So they'll make them more Republican friendly. Virginia's doing the opposite to make them more friendly for Democrats. They're having an intramural battle with each other that'll be a net zero for the overall map. Good news is that is not just a localized issue in Florida. Whatever the dynamic is at play in the Mar-a-Lago State House District is the same dynamic potentially in Wayne County, Michigan, in Cuyahoga County, Ohio, near Austin, near San Diego, and all these areas that are somewhat purple and that Democrats think they got a chance.
Well, I'm curious, I've talked to, I think I talked to Tim Miller from the Bulwark about this maybe a few months ago. Obviously, we have had reapportionment in Texas, in California. Gavin Newsom responded by redrawing the map there. There have been other states that are doing it. Net, having looked at the whole map, Scott, I'm curious, what where do we net out in terms of more Republican seats versus more Democratic seats?
It could end up being pretty much a draw. And I think that that's the most likely scenario. The redistricting is going to be an absolute self-inflicted wound to our politics because the Texas Republicans started it. Democrats could not unilaterally disarm. The fight metastasized across the country. It is absolutely corrosive to have a mid-decade redistricting, which is the opposite of what America was built on. But you couldn't let one party do it. They had to respond in kind. So some of it's going to come out in the wash, but I'm watching one state in particular
What?
for Democrats. In terms of the U.S. House, I think the whole ball game's in Pennsylvania. There are 4 Republican-held seats, which are genuine targets for Democrats. They may be favored before the voting begins. And you win all 4 in Pennsylvania, you just got to break even elsewhere. Look at Northeast Pennsylvania. Look at Harrisburg, Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Those places are where I think I would be investing the most resources if I was somebody watching, but also somebody truly spending to try to flip the House.
Well, it's going to be fascinating to watch the whole run up to the midterms. And I think you're at a very exciting place. I interviewed the 3 brothers, the founders of Midas Touch, and they are a really interesting group of people. And they're bringing in a lot of interesting voices in under their umbrella. And I wish you all the luck in the world, Scott. Thank you for talking to us. And I forgot, did you ever answer my question about an NDA?
I do not have an NDA. I don't think I was important enough to have an NDA. I liked the grilling on January 6th and on CBS. I would say tell the journalism students who I mentor at Syracuse University, respect the colleagues you leave behind, respect the colleagues who are there who you care about, and don't lob mortars if you don't know exactly what happened inside
I
a case.
guess you're right, but also you respect the colleagues you leave behind by
Yeah,
speaking out and telling the truth. That's another way to do that, Scott.
I couldn't agree more, and I suspect that everybody at CBS is cheering me on to tell what's going on.
All right. Well, thanks again for your time. I really, really appreciate it, Scott.
Thank you.
Okay, good luck. All right, next, everybody, we have Pamela Brown, who is going to be talking to us about Christian nationalism. Hold on 2 seconds. I got to hit the people thing. Sorry.
Say hi to
Uh,
Pamela for me.
I will. I will. Yeah, you guys know each other from DC, right?
Yeah, she's wonderful. She's another former CBSer. You can
I
ask her some
know.
questions about that.
Oh, I know. I don't think. Hold on. Don't remove him. Hit the 3 dots and remove. I'm trying to remove you, Scott. Sorry. I don't.
No, you're not
Nothing
the first
personal.
one. You're not the
Nothing
first one.
personal. It just says more options when I hit the 3 dots, Adriana. So, Scott, no offense, but can you remove
I
yourself?
sure can. Have a great one.
Sorry. Thank you. Okay. Now we'll go to Pamela. I didn't mean to be rude about that, but okay, Scott removed himself, I think. So here we have Pam Brown. I've been very interested in the rise of Christian nationalism, everybody, for years now. And Pam, Pamela Brown did an excellent special on Christian nationalism. Hi.
Hello. How are you? It's so good to be here with you.
Oh, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for doing this, and thank you
Course.
for your great reporting. Before you start, I just want to tell everybody who's watching that last year, CNN anchor and chief investigative correspondent Pamela Brown went to Moscow, or is it Moscow?
Moscow, Idaho.
Moscow, Idaho, to interview Pastor Douglas Wilson. He is Pete Hegseth's pastor, who says he thinks of himself as a pioneer of Christian nationalism. And that interview was the impetus for a documentary that Pamela did called The Rise of Christian Nationalism. It's available to watch on CNN's streaming platform. So anyone who missed it can go watch it there. I was so heartened and so appreciated, Pamela, that you focused on this. I'm curious about why you wanted to interview this Pastor Douglas Wilson in the first place.
Well, it's a great question. It was about a year ago. My husband had gave me this essay on Christian Reconstructionism, and he said, if you want to understand Pete Hegseth and what some others in the administration and Project 2025, what that's all about, you should read this essay. And so, as a dutiful journalist, I read it, and it really made me so curious on this movement and who's leading it and the impact it's having on America right now. And so I did some digging, and I wanted to find the right person to interview to better understand the movement. And it seemed like Douglas Wilson was the perfect person because he leads the church network that Pete Hegseth is a part of, CREC. And he is very influential. He is a self-proclaimed Christian nationalist, and his views have become more mainstream, especially now, since the second Trump administration. And he's been writing and talking about all of this for many decades, but now people are really paying more attention because you're seeing this unprecedented alignment between Christian nationalists like him and the Trump administration. And so we flew out there to Moscow, Idaho, and I sat down with him for like an hour and a half, and then I rode around the town with him. We spent a lot of time together, and um, I thought, wow, this was quite an eye-opening interview. I think it's probably going to capture some attention, but I could never have foreseen how much attention it actually garnered. It went viral. I mean, it went. Pete Hegseth retweeted my story. There was the clip of me with Wilson talking about women. He said women are the kind of people come out of, that got like 20 plus million views on social media. I mean, it just blew up. And then I had all these women reaching out to me saying, can you please interview the women who, we're survivors. We've left high control religious communities. We're deconstructing from religious trauma. And so I thought, well, I got to do more on this topic. And so we did.
Well, so can you encapsulate this pastor's views? I saw some of your coverage. I haven't seen the documentary yet. I'm really excited to watch it. But if you can encapsulate his views, I think it will answer the question of many of my followers have to define Christian nationalism.
So he wants Christian dominion in America. He wants this America to be a Christian theocracy. So he wants biblical rule over every area of life. Schools, he doesn't want public schools. He thinks public schools are bad. So he thinks in the education realm, the Bible should dictate how kids are learning, what they're exposed to. Government, biblical law as well, and the family life, that there should be a hierarchy in the family unit that he believes in his worldview that the Bible dictates, where you have a hierarchy where the husband is dominant and the wife is submissive and is the helpmeet to the husband, and that the husband is the head of the household. And ultimately, their belief is that the husband should vote on behalf of the house. And so he believes that the 19th Amendment should be repealed. Now, he said, look, this isn't something we're going to be able to do tomorrow, but ultimately, yes. If you take what their belief system is to its natural conclusion, that's what they want to do, and they're open about that. He believes homosexuality is a sin and punishable, as a crime. Sodomy is a crime. He wants to overturn Obergefell. He, has made some controversial comments about slavery, where he said years ago there was a mutual affection between slave owner and slaves. And I asked him about that and pressed him on that, and he said, Well, there were some examples of that, but ultimately he said he condemned what he called chattel slavery. And, he believes women should not be in combat roles. He is very happy to see Pete Hegseth crack down on, transgender people in the military, and that's so a lot of what you're seeing Pete Hegseth do is very much in line with the teachings of Doug Wilson.
He has praised Wilson for the work he's doing. He's saying things like America was founded as a Christian nation. It remains a Christian nation in our DNA if we can keep it. I did a short report on some of the language. Some members of this, as I think probably you included in your documentary, Pamela, that service members have reported being very concerned about sort of the holy war language and rhetoric that is coming from Pete Hegseth and other Pentagon leaders, really kind of framing what's happening in Iran as sort of a mission, a Christian mission in a way,
Mhm.
right?
A crusade. Yeah, I read about that the Military Religious Freedom Foundation was getting complaints from those in the military that they heard commanders say that, this is a holy war and that, this is end times, biblical prophecies, that kind of thing. Now, we haven't been able to verify that, but what I can tell you is Pete Hegseth, as a defense secretary, has been using a lot of biblical language in describing this war, which is, from my understanding, unusual for a defense secretary, right? I mean, it's the military is supposed to be secular. It's supposed to welcome people of all different religions. And he has been very specific in talking about Jesus Christ, bending your knee, pray to Jesus Christ, all of those things. And he wrote a book, Katie, called American Crusade, where he talked about this idea of fighting back against Islamism and linking arms and linking up with Israel to fight back against that. And so, right now, this is a war against Iran and Islamic Republic, right? And so one could ask the question, well, how much of this is driven by his religious beliefs versus, the national security and the other issues? I will tell you, though, I asked Doug Wilson about this. I said, do you look at this as a holy war and a biblical prophecy and all of that? And he said, actually, we do not. He says, we are post-millennialists. So we believe what we are trying to do is create a Christian golden age. We think that the world is going to become more Christian, and that will bring about the second coming of Christ. And the people who believe that the Iran war is a biblical prophecy are people who believe that that end times are soon, and Jesus Christ will come to Israel, and so it's a different belief system. But the idea of being on a crusade against Islamism is very much in line with what Pete Hegseth has been open about.
How widespread? Okay, well, just let the record show this is terrifying shit, right? You're telling me, Pamela. It's a lot of it I knew. This is not the country I want to live in. This is not the America I want to be in. And how widespread is this? I mean, how
Mhm.
many people ascribe to the same sort of philosophy that Pastor Wilson does? This guy.
Right, and look, and I pressed him on, "Well, what about people of different faiths and Jews
Well,
and
how about the
Muslims and
Constitution? They
atheists?"
have a
Well, and I
freedom of
pressed him on that too. I pressed him on the Constitution. I said, "The only time religion is mentioned in the Constitution is freedom of religion in the First Amendment and barring religious tests for office holders. And there is no mention of a Christian God." And I pressed on, "Well, wouldn't the founders of this country have made it explicit in the Constitution that they wanted this to be a theocracy?" And, the
And what does he
response
say? What does he
well,
say?
he
That
says,
this
"Well,
is
it says the year of our
antithetical.
Lord." He says, "The year of our Lord, that's Christ, that's Jesus Christ." And it was so obvious. Another Christian nationalist I interviewed, David Goodwin, who's head of the classical Christian education system, said, "Well, it was so obvious back then that it was a Christian nation and most people were Christian that they didn't need to put it in the Constitution." So they all had their sort of reasonings to every data point against that the founders of this country wanted this to be an official Christian nation. Now, that's not to say Christianity didn't have a big influence. Of course it did, right? But that's different from the framers wanting a official Christian nation, a theocracy. In terms of the belief system, about one third I think it's 1/3 of Americans believe in Christian nationalism. 2/3 don't, right? So more
One
a
third?
majority.
One
As a,
third?
well, the PRRI, the Religious Institute, I interviewed them for this piece, and it's a large. I mean, it's more than half of the Republicans in the country are Christian nationalists, according to their research.
Come
So they
on. Who
more
are
than
these people?
PRRI, yeah, according to their research. Everyone go
But
check it out. It's
who is
there.
what is
Um,
that group? I don't believe that.
it's a nonpartisan religious institute that does this
Are
kind of
you
research.
you believe that? Did you say half?
More than half of Republicans
Half of
are,
Republicans, sorry.
yeah, more than half of Republicans. Yes,
Sorry, I
that's a huge
misunderstood. I thought
portion.
you were saying more than half of Americans.
No, no,
Sorry.
no, no, no. More than half of Republicans, according to this research institute, um, identify as Christian nationalists. Well, I want to be clear though on something. This is a trend that's been going on a long time. It's not new, right? And it's the label has evolved. Some people reject the label because it's been conflated with white nationalism and other things that they don't like. Um, but I think what's new now is is the influence of these Christian supremacists like Doug Wilson and the Trump administration, and how you're seeing the sort of the rise people in power like a Pete Hegseth and others in the administration who consider themselves Christian nationalists. They're in power and they're making decisions that have real implications. And one of the things that they want to do is get rid of the Department of Education. And
Well,
guess
they
what's
have.
happening right now? Exactly. I mean, that is very much a Christian nationalist goal. Get rid of the Department of Education, right? And that's happened. I mean, that is
It is
happening.
also, I imagine one of their main goals is to get rid of separation of church and state. Ergo, you see public schools in Oklahoma and Tennessee and other states basically have the 10 commandments on the
Mhm.
wall in public schools, and they're trying to infuse Christianity in public education, for example, all over the country, correct?
Yes, that is correct. In Oklahoma, they have Bibles in classrooms. They want to put the 10 Commandments in classrooms in Louisiana. In Texas, they have the curriculum that was very controversial, as you'll recall, because it's biblically based curriculum, and parents who weren't Christian were like, "Well, wait a second, my child."
How
Uh,
about
uh, uh,
parents? Hey, wait, how about parents who are Christian?
or parents who are Christian, right? I mean, and we should also note a lot of Christians aren't Christian nationalists too, right? There's that element, but what education to them is key. It's foundational as part of their movement. In their view, if you shape the minds of young people, then you shape the country. And so, while ultimately the goal is to get rid of public schools, right? That is the end goal. They view this effort as, infusing more Christianity and religion into the classroom as a way to shape the minds of young
Well,
people, right?
it's not dissimilar to how madrasas basically shape people to become Islamic fundamentalists, right?
A lot of people have made that comparison, and of course they reject that, and there is very much a sense of, well, we're on the right side. We have the good God. Our view is biblically based, and that is the truth. That is God's word. So everything else doesn't matter, and this is what God's word is, and this is what we should believe. And there are many Americans, Katie, and I've heard from several of them who do believe that removing prayer and taking religion out has been bad for America. I mean, these are deeply held beliefs of um,
Well, I think you can say that, right, Pamela, and you can feel that way, but this is an extreme. I
this is
mean,
imposing. The difference here is they want to impose, not just live as Christians. That's the
yeah.
key difference.
So I know that you spoke to some couples, right?
I did. Mhm.
And uh, as part of the segment, and you interviewed them, and tell us what they had to say about women's rights in the home and generally as citizens. I would like to have been interviewed by you on this. I am not a follower of Pastor Wilson. I think it's pretty
Well,
clear.
I've gathered. Um, so I will say this, Katie. Both communities in Moscow and in Taylor, Texas, where I went and spent time with the Christian nationalist community, they were lovely. they open their doors to us, and I give them credit for putting themselves out there, right? I mean, they view CNN as Doug Wilson put it, the other side of the barrier, or the enemy, you know? They they really believe that secular society is the enemy, right? And so the mainstream media is part of that. But so I give them credit for, um, putting themselves out there and letting and trusting me as a CNN journalist to tell the story. But and they had a very tight-knit community, and in fact, I think a lot of people would envy the community that they have. But then I asked Doug Wilson, "Well, how do you know you're not in a cult? How do you know that these aren't cults?" And he said, "Well, people lament we don't have community anymore, but then when you create community, then people say you're a cult. We're Christians, we believe things." But I sat down with these couples, married couples, and I really wanted to understand this dynamic of the Christian patriarchy and submission. Because, I mean, I'll just put it out there, that's not the way my marriage is. I,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so
If my husband heard this, he'd be like, "Oh, yeah. No, that's
yeah.
not happening." But go
I
on.
mean, we both pitch in. We have 3 kids. We try to, but there it's very black and white. And, the women see their primary role as taking care of the home, taking care of the children, and glorifying the home for the husband who is the provider and who makes the key decisions for the family.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the women will tell you they're flourishing, and it takes a lot of pressure off of them, and they say they don't covet that responsibility. That was a through line. And they don't they some of them have jobs like, a florist or this or that, but they don't call them jobs, they call them side hustles because they don't want to give off the impression that their family and their kids are not the top priority. Um so, I mean, the ones I sat down with, they were lovely, and they try to convey that they are living by God's design of marriage, and they're happy with it. But I talked to several women on the other side of this, Katie, and I think this
I
is
know
super
you
important.
talk to people who left the church.
Yes, who left, and I think this is really important. Women who left who are deconstructing now, and they're part of this group called Deconstruction Doulas, led by Margaret Bronson, who said that they realized that they had no sense of agency, and they were getting sick. They were having panic attacks and anxiety and chronic illness. And I mean, imagine if you were brought up from a young age to believe this one thing in this hierarchy. And, as a child, you're taught that you have to be obedient to your parents, because if you're not obedient to your parents, you're being disobedient to God, and therefore you're punished for just, being a kid. I mean, a lot of them are raised in this environment, right? And these women found that, wow, once they got older, and they were in these marriages and these communities, they found that they weren't happy, and that they were really having a lot of issues. And in some cases, they experienced abuse, because what they say is this hierarchy, this power structure in these communities gives protection to abusers, and there's very little recourse. And so some of them were emotionally abused, physically abused, because there's also a hierarchy with the siblings. The older brother has power over the younger sister, kind of thing. And I interviewed a young woman, Glory, who was sexually abused by her brother. He's now behind bars. But she said she didn't even know that she was being abused, because she just was never taught about it. She was never taught about her body. She just didn't even know. She always thought, "Okay, I'm supposed to trust my brother. My brother's in charge of me, so this must be okay." You know? And so through time, these women took I think it takes a lot of courage to leave a life behind and your identity behind you've had your whole life, no matter what you think about all of this,
And
and create a new life for yourself, and a new life for yourself on the outside that they were taught for years and years was bad. The outside was bad, because these are very insular communities.
did they leave their husbands? Or are they out on their own?
So not all of them did. In fact, some of them are still with their husbands. In fact, some of them were like their husbands, they were trying to be more submissive and call their husbands my lord and do all the things that they thought they were supposed to do. And the husbands in some of these cases were like, "You don't need to do that." Like this. And one of the women said, "Because my husband listened to me and loved me and was so great to me, I didn't understand what's the problem with this setup, because we had a great marriage." But then they started hearing about abuse And then it was like one case after another. And they recognize not all these marriages are going to be like this, right? But
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you about, you were talking about how some Christian nationalists don't like the branding, right? That they
Mhm.
get conflated with white supremacists. Having said that, did you find them to be a racially diverse group of people? And did you talk to them about,
Mhm.
you mentioned at the top that Doug Wilson had some pretty um, questionable things to say about slavery. So I'm curious if in the Venn diagram there's much overlap between Christian nationalism and white supremacy.
It's a fair question because a lot of this has its roots in white evangelical Christianity, right? Um, the pastors I interviewed, Pastor Wilson, Pastor Jeff Ripple in Texas, they decry racism. They say anyone is welcome here, no matter your skin color, no matter your ethnicity, your background, everyone is welcome. Um, and when I was in Moscow, Idaho, I actually interviewed a young man who took his family from Africa to this community to be a part of it. And I asked him, well, because it is an obvious question. I mean, how many other Black members are part of this church? And he said, well, there's a few, you know. So I don't think it's like very racially diverse. I think that's safe to say, but they will tell you that they reject white nationalism, that is shameful and something that's really that they frown upon from the past, and they don't want to be associated with it.
One of my followers asked, when Hegseth asked us to pray for our troops in the name of Jesus, it made me cringe. Don't Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, and others get to pray for them too?
Yeah.
I think it has been very interesting of late. You mentioned Pete Hegseth using biblical language to talk about what's happening in Iran. We heard Donald Trump, I believe, yesterday, or maybe it was 2 days ago, say in Memphis about, I believe it was about the SAVE Act. My team or somebody on this can correct me if I'm wrong. Do it for Jesus, right? So
Mhm.
you do see this kind of language creeping into sort of the discourse,
Oh
um,
yeah.
and I guess we'll see it more and more, right?
I mean, yeah, this administration is unapologetic in terms of promoting Christianity, creating an anti-Christian or bias Christian task force, something like that. Now they say, look, we're not putting one religion over another, but the way they talk, you heard Pete Hegseth be specific about Jesus Christ and Trump and the language he's used around it, although he's never officially come out and said, this is a Christian nation. He knows a lot of his followers are evangelicals, right?
Right.
And I think this is an
Even though
important
he
point.
can't remember his favorite passage from the Bible.
Right. There's that. There's that. This is important. And I think this was in the doc and this really stayed with me. The assassination attempts against him, those were really a turning point for Christian nationalists who really came to believe that God saved Trump. And Trump has said it himself. He believes that God saved him to save America, right? So you have people who really believe, and Paula Cain White, who's the pastor, evangelical pastor who leads the White House Faith Office, has said herself that if to go against Trump would be to go against God. And so there's a portion of the population that is now even more convinced that whatever Trump does is God's will. He could start World War III, and that would be God's will. And the assassination attempts and him surviving that really, I think, fueled that belief among more Christian nationalists.
Really interesting. Well, as I said, I'm very excited to watch your documentary. Rob Reiner actually executive produced. I don't know if you watched it, Pamela, a few years ago, a documentary about Christian nationalism as well, which I think I watched maybe 2 years ago. Which is a really interesting look at it. I'll look up
I
the
need to
name of
watch
it.
that. I need to watch it. I haven't had a chance, but I heard it was very good, very
Yeah,
interesting.
but it was interesting, but I think because it was done a couple of years ago and so much has changed in the movement and it has become even stronger, I think, your documentary is going to be a lot more relevant to what we're seeing in the second Trump administration. But I really appreciate you coming in and coming on and talking about it with us. And again, tell us how people can see it and the name of the documentary, how they can find it.
Sure, I think that's important. So you can go to CNN All Access. You have to get a digital subscription, and then once you go on there, you go to Original Series, the whole story, and it'll be under there again called "The Rise of Christian Nationalism." I hope everyone will check it out, no matter what your belief system is, Katie. Like, I think it's important for everyone to be aware of this and know what's happening in their country, and know better understand what people in power are doing and perhaps why they're doing it.
Right. And how, sorry, my phone is running out of juice, and how it's impacting what's going on in the halls of power in this country. Really, really important subject. I said earlier, I'm really happy that you did this and
Thank you.
really focused on it and shared what you found with the rest of the country. Great
Well,
to
thank you
see
for
you.
shining the spotlight with this interview too. I appreciate it,
Yeah,
Katie, because
of
it's
course, of
important and I'm
course.
passionate about it. So
And
thank you.
I just saw Scott McFarland, who said to tell you hi, because
Oh, he's so great.
we're all watch well, he didn't really answer any of my questions, but he seems like a nice enough fellow.
But did I
But
answer your questions?
you
I
answered
did.
my questions. You did.
Okay, good. Good.
I'm on a tear
Hey,
today.
by
I
the
have
way,
no
can I say something really quick to everyone on here? Katie, I was like 12 years old, I think, and I met you in New York at a horse race because I wanted to be a broadcaster. That was my dream. And my mom introduced us, and you were so nice to me, and you sat down with me and gave me career advice, and I'll never
I
forget
did?
it. And I try to pay it forward to others because you gave me so much hope and confidence that I could do it one day. And now
Aw.
2 decades in, here I am, but I'll never forget being a kid and talking to you and being so excited, and you taking the time to believe in me and talk to me meant so much.
Well,
So thank you for that.
I'm really proud. Thank you for saying that. I'm glad it was nice. Can you
You were
imagine if
very
you said,
nice.
"I was introduced to you and you were such a bitch?"
No, quite the opposite, and I remember
I
that, and I tried to pay it forward in the same way because it had a big impact on me. So,
well, I'm really
I'm glad I
proud
had
of
the opportunity to
everything.
thank you.
Thank you, and I'm really proud of everything you're doing, both on CNN on a regular basis and
Thank you.
really shining a lens on these really important issues that people do need to know about and understand. So, right back
Thank
at
you.
you. Thank
Okay.
you, and
Thank you.
hope our paths cross again soon.
I hope so too, Katie. All
Okay,
right,
thanks,
take care.
Pamela. Okay, bye. Okay, now everyone's okay. Pamela left. You guys, it's all right. I'm talking to my team because am I ready for Jamie Raskin? Oh, we have 6 minutes. Okay, well, you know what? Why don't we just ask questions of our viewers? Jamie Raskin is going to be talking to us about these. I am sorry I didn't see that, you guys. I'm trying to do my team is kind of saying that they're going to kill me, but don't do that. And it's because I was doing a lot of other stuff, and um, he might be coming soon. So let me go ahead and invite him in, and I'll tell you guys what we're going to be talking about. Hey, this is what independent media is all about. Hold on. REP Raskin. Hold on. Oh gosh. Hi everyone. Thank you for your patience. Here we go. I'm going to invite him whenever he comes, he'll show up. I'm waiting for him. So let me just tell you all. Oh, do you want to give your reaction thoughts to my convo with Scott? I'm happy to do that. That was frustrating. I don't know Scott McFarlane. He seems like a very nice guy, and I know he's a very respected reporter. Um, but I felt like he was sort of pulling his punches, talking about the changes in leadership at CBS News and the pressure to kind of frame current events in a way that are more palatable to the Trump administration, which I think is grossly inappropriate for a news organization. We are news journalists, real journalists are supposed to be searching for facts and truth. And I one of my biggest disappointments in the current landscape is that if you try to be factual and you also say what's going on and you report what is actually happening, if it's not favorable to the administration, it's viewed as biased. And I think we have a real crisis of trust in the media. I mean, there are a lot of reasons for that. Fragmentation, atomization of media is creating a lot of the problems, and polarization is creating a lot of the problems. But anyway, I was slightly frustrated. I appreciated his coming on, but I was slightly frustrated with his answers. Let me tell you what I'm going to be taught. And by the way, if anybody has any questions for me, why did he leave? I missed the beginning. Oh, he left, I think, primarily, according to our interview, he left because, you know, as you all know, because my followers are so smart, linear television, broadcast news, traditional broadcast news has declined significantly. As I mentioned, the CBS Evening News has its lowest ratings since 2000. So the trajectory is not a positive one. And so I think Scott's argument for leaving CBS is he wanted to be an independent journalist where he was in a different format, where he could have these kind of direct conversations with people. It could be more interactive, et cetera. And so I tried to press him on that about it's not just the delivery system, but it is the approach to actual news events that I think has shifted at CBS. But he seemed to say that that wasn't the reason he left, and was very careful, I think, wanting to respect his colleagues there. But as I said at the end, maybe the best way to respect your colleagues is to speak truth to power and be honest about a situation that maybe is antithetical to journalistic principles. Okay, I'm going to get off my high horse on that now, you guys. But I also wanted to tell you I'm going to be going live with the Bulwark crew with Tim Miller and JVL at 6:30 p.m. on YouTube and Substack. We're going to be talking about Iran. We're going to be talking about the new Pentagon uh, press restrictions, which are very troubling. See, do we see a trend here? Controlling the information, shooting the messenger. But anyway, we're going to be talking with the Bulwark guys about gas prices, DHS hearing today, ICE at the airports, what's happening with DHS funding, what happened in Florida yesterday, as I mentioned. And then we're ending by talking about Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. And I'm going to be talking about that at the end of our conversation today. And Raskin is coming. Thank you, Katie. Raskin is coming. This is my producer, Julia Lewis, who says that he is coming. And let me tell you what we're talking to Jamie Raskin about, who I think is terrific. I don't know how you all feel about Jamie Raskin, but I think he's so impressive. And I admire him a lot. So, new documents, everybody, released by the Justice Department to Congress are shedding fresh light on the classified documents case against Donald Trump, while also raising new questions about how Trump handled some of the most sensitive material in the U.S. government after leaving office. So, Jamie Raskin, as you all know, is the top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, and he's called the revelations damning as is demanding further information. So we're going to be hearing from Congressman Raskin about that. In the meantime, anybody have any questions for me? We're like, this is what we used to call in television. We're stretching. We're stretching. Um, Hi, Katie. So here he is. You don't have to ask me any questions. Hey, Congressman.
Hello, Katie. Thank you for inviting me on your show.
Oh my gosh,
very nice
we invite you every week, Congressman. So we're so happy that you are here and we can talk to you. And thank you so much for joining us. God, I don't know how you keep up. I can barely keep up with everything that's happening. How do you do it?
It is very difficult to keep up. I was just reflecting today on all of the scandals and all of the corruption because the revelations are just coming out like a waterfall at the same time that we are trying to make some progress on public policy the best we can, and at the same time I'm out there campaigning to try to win the House and the Senate back for the Democratic majority in the country.
Well, there were some good signs of that in Florida yesterday, right? Do you want to talk about the trend that we're seeing, even though it's a long way to November, Congressman?
Yeah, I mean, it's an eternity away. On the other hand, it's also like the day after tomorrow. I mean, we have to have a sense of urgency about it, but we know a lot can happen between now and then. So, even when we have a great victory, like a smashing victory, as we did in Florida yesterday, or like we had in Texas with a seat Democrats recaptured with a 21-point swing, even with that, our job is to wake up the next day and get right back out there and keep campaigning and keep working because there are tons of independents and tons of disaffected Republicans who can't take it anymore. And they're coming our way. And we've got to be there to welcome them, to tell them that they're being heard and that we need them as part of this Democratic movement.
I mean, what do you think the unifying message is, Congressman? I think the Democratic Party writ large is a lot more diverse, or at least perhaps less disciplined in its messaging than the Republican Party. You can argue with me if you want on that. But what is the unifying message? There has to be more than we've got to get rid of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
It's got to be like, what are Democrats saying to voters that will make them have more faith and, quite frankly, a party that they've also lost faith in?
Well, we've got two rival public philosophies in contest in America today. And one public philosophy, supported by my political party, which is huge, unwieldy, lots of different groups and lots of
Right.
different people in it. But our public philosophy is very clear. The government must be an instrument for the common good of all of the people. It must be working every single day to advance the welfare of the people, whether we're talking about education, whether we're talking about healthcare of every person in the country, whether we're talking about protecting the environment. That's what government does. The other vision, the other public philosophy is that government is an instrument for the private self enrichment of the guy who gets in there and his family and his political party and his friends. Those are two radically contrasting approaches to what government has got to be about. And so we've been winning very much with the message of healthcare for every American, right? They've been throwing millions of people off of Medicaid. They've been getting rid of the ACA tax credits. They're making it harder for people to get the health care that they need. And we are trying to advance the value that in the richest society that has ever existed in the history of humanity, that we can afford to keep our people healthy. And if COVID-19 taught us nothing else, it's that my health care and my health are connected to your health and your health care. We want everybody to be in a relationship with doctors so they're getting the health care that they need. And it's the same thing with education, and it's the same thing with the environment. We want to be uplifting everybody in the country.
How do you keep Democrats from eating their young or like being part of a circular firing squad? And there's that constant tension between, is the Democratic Party too progressive? Should it become back to the center to attract more independents, which who really do decide national elections? And I'm curious how you look at that, Congressman, because I think that someone was saying about Governor Newsom. I interviewed him for his book recently, and they were saying he's too progressive to be centrist, too centrist to be a progressive. He's kind of a man without his part of the party. And how do you square those things and make sure that Democrats don't kill each other?
Well, I think a lot of the old labels are meaningless in the current fight to defend democracy and democratic freedom in the country. Um, so, have I lost you there, Katie? Because you're frozen. Am I frozen too? Um, am I frozen or so? Should I? Sorry, Katie, you were frozen there. I think, can you hear me now? Good. Anyway, what I'm saying is that at this point, the Democrats are everybody's party. As flawed as we are, as imperfect as we are, and everybody tells us we're not great messengers or PR people. But listen to this, okay? Um, we are liberals because the heart of that word is liberty. We are progressives because the heart of that word is progress. If we're not making progress, what are we doing in politics? But we are conservatives because we want to conserve the land, the air, the water, the climate system, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act. Everything that their party of nihilists and authoritarians wants to destroy is everything that we've got to conserve today. So at this point, we are the party of the progressives, the liberals, and the conservatives, and we got to try to bring everybody together in order to defend democracy and make progress in America. And I really believe that. And when I go out on the road, and I've been in Oregon and Washington, when I was just down in North Carolina, I was in New Hampshire, I was in Ohio. Um, I'm finding that those old labels don't mean anything to anybody. People want to know, is our party going to be out there fighting for the Constitution, fighting for the Bill of Rights, fighting for everything that is in peril in America today? I get calls from veterans constantly. I get calls from Republicans constantly saying, we can't take it anymore. We do not buy the corruption, the illegal war. We do not buy the lying that they see from the Republican Party. And can the Democrats find room for us? The answer is yes. The Democrats have room for everybody who wants to make progress for everybody in our country. Um, Donald Trump is in common cause with Vladimir Putin. It's totally clear. With Viktor Orban, with the homicidal crown prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, with all the authoritarians and thugs, Donald Trump spends his time with them. That's who he's interested in. We have got to get back to our belief, our faith, and our commitment to the American Constitution, the American Bill of Rights, the things that democracy has built for us that prior generations of Americans have fought for, like Social Security, like Medicare, like Medicaid, like public education, like the Voting Rights Act, like the Civil Rights Act, like the Clean Air Act, like the Clean Water Act. These are things that our Democratic forebears have fought for, have championed, and people have shed blood and sweat and tears to make happen. And we've got to vindicate all of the democratic movements of our history, all the civilizing movements that have brought us to where we are. Donald Trump and MAGA have been trying to destroy all of that. We got to get back to progress for the country. Filibustered. I just kept talking, so forgive me.
No, I'm so grateful because my friggin' phone died in the middle of your answer. So
It happens to
thank
me.
you.
It happens to me all the time, but usually around 8:30 or 9 p.m., not so early in the day. You probably got a very early start this morning.
I did, and I'm so, so sorry about that. But basically, you were talking about the messaging for the Democrats, and just give me a synopsis because I missed
Well,
it.
I guess, my thing is that, look, messaging has always got to be rooted in what your real political program is. And our political program right now has a defensive aspect and an offensive aspect. And the defensive aspect is we've got to defend our Constitution and our Bill of Rights, the right to assemble, the right to free speech, the right of free press, the Fourth Amendment right not to have your door kicked down by government agents without a search warrant, and so on. So we've got to defend everything that we've built up in America, and then we've got to move forward. So this is what I'm saying about healthcare, right? We're the richest society on earth at our richest moment on earth, although Donald Trump is doing everything in his power to break our economy. But we've got to make sure that we've got health care for every American citizen. We've got to deliver health care to our people. That's just central, but that is reflective of our commitment, which is the government has got to be an instrument for the common good and not an instrument for the corrupt self-enrichment for the guy who gets in.
Well, let me ask you why that message doesn't seem to be getting to Donald Trump's hardcore supporters. You would think that many of them would be disillusioned with some of the things that are happening, whether it's, you know, trampling on constitutional rights, as you said, the level of corruption, which is unparalleled in history, I think, probably in not just modern history, in history. He's enriched himself and his cronies and his family upward and more than $4 billion at this point in time. I mean, why are people still supporting him in your view?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're right on how much money he's made. He's made millions of dollars, millions times more money than every other president in American history combined when they were in the presidency. I mean, nobody ever went close to doing what he's doing. It has been essentially a money making operation. So you're right. So why are his people sticking with him? Well, first of all, um, not all of them are. Every day, his constituency is melting away. And remember, we don't need to win 100% of the people who support Donald Trump. We don't need Donald Trump Jr. on our side. We don't need Stephen Miller on our side. I'm not sure we want Stephen Miller on our side, but we need those people who voted for him in good faith because they thought he was actually going to end inflation on day one instead of spiraling inflation out of control with an unauthorized, undeclared war in Iran that has made everybody's gasoline prices go up 75 or 80 cents a gallon. There are people he's losing every day on his own just by virtue of his policies. If we win away 5% or 10% of Trump's people, this will be a landslide, the kind of landslide you saw in Florida yesterday, or we saw in Texas, or that we're seeing across the country. If you average together all the elections we've had over the last year, and I'm talking about in Virginia with Abigail Spanberger's smashing historic victory for governor, or Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey, or what we're seeing in state Senate races in Florida or in Texas around the country, if you average them all together, Democrats are up 12 or 13 points above where we were in the last election cycle in the same place. Well, that suggests that if we do our job right, if we keep fighting, if we build democracy summer, which I want to tell you all about, then we will have a landslide election in November. And Abraham Lincoln may then have been the founder of the Republican Party, and Donald Trump may have been the concluder of the Republican Party. It could be replaced by another political party. And hey, that's great. Competition is great in politics, like it's great in sports, and it's great in economics. We need real competition. But what they're doing is a threat to our entire political system.
And I want to hear about democracy in summer in a moment, but I have to talk to you about these classified documents because that's one of the reasons we reached out to your team. That blows me off all the time. You have to come on more often, Congressman. I'm really fun to talk to, don't you think? Even when
You
my
are
phone
extremely fun
dies.
to talk to. And I know
I
you're
want
just down the road from us in Maryland. You're in Charlottesville, right? Or
so
somewhere down.
yeah, no. I'm in LA now, but I'm from
Ah,
Virginia originally. My daughter's getting her PhD at UVA, but I live in New York now.
I see.
Anyway, but from Virginia originally. But let me ask you about this classified doc story because I feel like all these scandals kind of blend into each other. So
Yes.
tell me about these revelations. You called them damning, and it's basically about why Donald Trump had those classified documents.
Yes. Well, this is a comical story, Katie, because of course the Republicans are still after Jack Smith. Because if Donald Trump has a vendetta, if he's obsessed with someone and he's obsessed with Jack Smith, then all the Republicans are obsessed with him. So they're still trying to put out dirt on Jack Smith. And Pam Bondi's Department of Justice sent us another document. But somehow they missed the fact that in that document, there was information in the report they've been doing everything in their power to suppress, which was volume 2 of Jack Smith's investigation on Donald Trump. Remember, the first one was about January 6th and Donald Trump's incitement of violent insurrection against the union and his attempt to create a political coup against the election, which Joe Biden had won by more than 7 million votes, 306 to 232 in the Electoral College. The second volume was about Donald Trump pilfering documents on his way out of the White House and taking them down to
Right.
Mar-a-Lago. Well, you'll remember they ended up in the bathtub in one of the
Right. In the
bathrooms down in the
bathroom by the
basement.
toilet. Yeah.
Like all over the place, they found hundreds of stolen documents. Well, one of the big mysteries has been, why did he do that? Why did he expose himself to federal criminal prosecution for stealing s- classified documents, top secret documents, illegal possession of government documents that weren't his? When, we've always been emphatic about that. How did that happen? And why did it happen? Well, it turns out, according to this small snippet that we got from Jack Smith's investigative materials, there's a memo in there where they say that this was done for business reasons, that he had a business motivation for taking these documents out. Some of them were so top secret, only 6 people in the entire federal government, including the president of the United States himself, only 6 people had access to them. He stole that document. Then there was another document, which was a map of something. Nobody knows what it was. Was it a map of Gettysburg and battles from the Civil War, or was it a map from Iran, perhaps? We don't know. But that was taken, and Donald Trump was seen showing that to people on an airplane after he left office. Again, there's
Okay.
discussion of
So,
that.
Congressman, what
Yeah,
does that mean for business reasons?
we have no idea. Um, we don't know. We know here's one perhaps completely unrelated or very relevant fact. Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, took a cool $2.5 billion from the royal crown prince of Saudi Arabia. Um, and is in business with him. He's in business with other corrupt oil monarchies from the Middle East. We know they're very close to them. There was a report today, actually, that the crown prince is trying to stop Donald Trump from ending the war in Iran because he wants to see more military actions and more destruction before the war is over. So who knows what it means? And this is why we say to the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi and under Donald Trump, release the special counsel report. Every other special counsel report by anybody on any side, Ken Starr, Robert Mueller, Robert Hur, all of the reports have been released. Why have they not released that one report about all of these stolen documents? Well, we might have a little clue in the fact that there was at least a belief on the part of some of the people on the special counsel's team that these documents were taken for business reasons. Is that special counsel report too hot for them to be released? And that's why Bondi won't release it. That's why they've got their judge, Eileen Cannon, down in Florida saying, no, never release it. She issued an order saying this can never be released. In the entire history of the Republic, it can never be released. Like, what's going on?
So, how much has any of it been released?
Volume 2, none of it has been released. Um, and so we don't know exactly what's in there. But some of it now, we have a glimpse of some of what was going on there. And these documents were extremely sensitive, extremely top secret. At least some of them were. Um, Donald Trump was showing them to people on an airplane, suggesting that maybe he showed off with them in different social contexts. We've certainly heard about that in other kinds of media reports. But also, it does seem to be intertwined with his business interests. As you were saying, this is a guy who's made billions of dollars in just over a year since he got back into office. Billions of dollars. No other president of the United States ever did anything remotely like that. He's turned the White House into a money-making enterprise.
And you also have asked for more information, correct me if I'm wrong, or somebody on Capitol Hill, about Jared Kushner's role in the Middle East as he negotiates these things with Steve Witkoff and goes to all these different countries. There's reason to believe, is there not, that he is lining his own pockets in the process?
Who is he working for? Is he a government employee? Well, not that. Is he there as a special ambassador? I don't think so. Or is he there just as a member of Donald Trump's family, or is he representing his own business interests? In Trump world, it's all mixed together. They're all making money all of the time on public policy.
But how can you stop that? It's so frustrating, I'm sure, to people listening to this. It's so corrupt, and yet there are no checks or balances on what's happening.
Well, the people are the ultimate check and balance because, in American democracy, those of us who aspire and attain to public office are nothing but the servants of the people. And the moment that somebody acts not like the servant of the people, but like a king, or a queen, or a monarch, or an emperor, that is the moment to diselect, evict, eject, reject, impeach, try, convict, remove, start all over again. And so the people have to use every means at our disposal to get our government back to be the servant of the people, rather than being this runaway business operation for a bunch of billionaires and oligarchs.
Someone asks, is it true that Donald Trump is taking money in exchange for pardons?
Well, the New York Times has a fantastic series that they've been doing on this, and the most recent one, it's really amazing because you'll recall that they were getting the sense that people are upset about all of the fraud and corruption. So President Trump appointed J.D. Vance to head up an anti-fraud task force. This is after they fired 17 or 18 inspectors general, whose
Right.
job it really is to ferret out fraud and corruption and abuse. This is after they've dismantled the anti-kleptocracy units in the Department of Justice and the FBI, after they totally dismantled the anti-fraud infrastructure. Now he wants to set up a task force to do it. And the New York Times has this really fascinating story, which I must say is based on work that was done by the House Judiciary Democrats, our incredible members and staff. But what we did was we looked at the pardons that Donald Trump is giving. Now, he's giving pardons at a rate totally unseen in our lifetimes. Nobody's ever seen anything like this, right? There were 1,600 insurrectionists and rioters who were pardoned immediately, but now all of these other white-collar fraudsters have been pardoned, dozens of them. And when you add up all of the fines and restitution that they owed to the government and that they owed to their victims of their frauds, it's $1.3 billion. And I was making a little speech about this on the floor, that $1.3 billion had been forgiven for the perpetrators of crime against the victims of the crime. That's money being taken away from the victims of crime and from the taxpayers. And one of the Republicans got up and said, well, Joe Biden, he did worse. He did the exact same thing, hundreds of millions of dollars. And you know what? There was an article about it done by the Cato Institute, which is, of course, a conservative libertarian organization. All of the fines forgiven by Joe Biden added up to less than $1 million. Less than $1 million, and it was $1.3 billion that Donald Trump has forgiven in just a year. He's just getting started. And so you ask, is it pay to play? Well, a lot of those people have given a lot of money to Donald Trump's different entities and campaigns, and you can find that in that great New York Times article.
I know you have to go, and your team has been very strict with us. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again, but just very quickly in 15 seconds, how much will things change if Democrats take the House in the midterms?
Well, in terms of getting the truth out, we're going to have a lot more means at our disposal in terms of the subpoena power and our ability to try to shine a light on the corruption. If we win the House and the Senate, we will be able to get a lot of legislation passed. Maybe Donald Trump vetoes it, and we will try to pull over whatever self-respecting Republicans are left to overturn the vetoes in order to try to serve the people. But ultimately, we're not going to get through this nightmare completely until we take the House back, the Senate back, and the White House back, because they've had all three, and we can see what that has meant for the people of the United States. It has meant corruption, criminality, undeclared war, and total plummeting of our economy while prices have been soaring.
Okay, Congressman, come back and talk to me anytime. Thank you so much.
I will definitely come back and see you, Katie, and thanks for everything you do.
Okay, see you later. Bye. Okay, we have one more guest before we leave. After Congressman Raskin splits, and let me to get her on the horn. And please don't go, you guys, because this is really important life-saving information. So just indulge me for just a few more minutes. I appreciate you all. Um, hold on. I have two Sophie Balzoras, but let's see if we can get her. Um, hi.
Hi, I'm fired up.
Oh, good. I'm so glad to see you, Sophie. And everyone, please don't go because we have life saving information to share with you. So, let me introduce my friend, Sophie Balzora. She is a doctor, she's a gastroenterologist at NYU Langone Inflammatory Bowel Disease Center. She specializes in managing patients with a wide range of gastrointestinal conditions with a particular focus on inflammatory bowel disease, IBD, and complex cases of Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. If that's not impressive enough, she's also founding president of the Association of Black Gastroenterologists and Hepatologists. You're giving me a lot of big words to say, Sophie, and former chair of the American College of Gastroenterology Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. So, Sophie, Dr. Sophie Balzora, thank you so much. Um, my phone died in the middle of my conversation with Jamie Raskin. I can't even believe it, but you're plugged in. I can't right now, and so that won't happen. All right, you all. The reason why I wanted to have Sophie on is March is Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. It's something I care deeply about. And 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 as many of you know who followed me, my husband Jay died of colorectal cancer in 1998, really just a few weeks after his 42nd birthday. And it has become part of my mission in life to educate people about this disease. And I wanted to talk to Sophie about it because not only are people not enough people are getting screened, and the age has been lowered to 45. Um, but colorectal cancer has become the number 2 cancer killer of people under the age of 50. So I guess the first question I wanted to ask you, Sophie, is just starting with the beginning of my statement. Why was the age lowered to 45? Because I know that for Black Americans, it had been 45 for some time.
Right, right. So, unfortunately, I'm gonna correct you in saying that it's actually the number 1 cancer killer for people under 50 now.
Oh, didn't I say did I say number 2?
Yeah, it was number
Oh,
2.
I'm so sorry. I
No,
meant
that's
number
okay.
1. I apologize.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's terrible, very sobering news, but yeah, as of 2026, it's now the leading cancer killer, in America,
I
unfortunately.
apologize. If I didn't say that, I meant to say it's number 1. Sorry.
Yeah. No, of course, but yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we're seeing younger and younger people being diagnosed, and unfortunately, they're diagnosed at later stages, which means that sadly, their chances of survival at 5 years is much lower than if it's caught earlier. So at first, the screening age for average risk people was 50, and like you said, for people who are Black, the screening age had been 45 because we were seeing higher rates in Black folks. And so now, because we are seeing those rates jump across all races and ethnicities, thankfully the age has been lowered to 45. Uh,
Having said that, Sophie, I know only
yeah,
1 in 5 people between the ages of 45 and 50 are getting screened for colorectal cancer. The American Cancer Society lowered the age, I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago, right, Sophie? But
yeah,
the word, I don't think it's permeated the national consciousness. And
no,
so one of the reasons I wanted to have Sophie on is to really remind people or to tell them if they didn't know that at the age of 45, you need to get your baseline colorectal cancer screening if you're of average risk. I would like to preface that with if you have a first line relative, a father, mother, brother, sister, aunt, uncle who was diagnosed with colorectal cancer, you need to get screened 10 years prior to that diagnosis. So my husband Jay was diagnosed at 41. My daughters have their first screening at 31.
right.
And by the way, I also want to say, and then I'm going to let you talk, Sophie, but family history, no family history is no guarantee. The
Mhm.
vast majority of colorectal cancer cases have no family history. I think it's like 75%, right, Sophie?
It's a pretty high number, I think, which people don't realize.
So a lot of people, I think, they have this false sense of security. They say, "Oh, it doesn't run in my family. I don't have to worry about it." But
Mhm.
that's not true. And your specialty, like irritable bowel syndrome and Crohn's and all those put you at a higher risk too, right, Sophie?
So I'll say, it's not uncommon to confuse the two because the acronym is almost exactly the same. But thankfully, with irritable bowel syndrome or IBS, that does not increase your risk of colorectal cancer.
Okay, but ulcerative.
Yes, but inflammatory bowel disease or IBD, um,
Okay.
yes, exactly. If it involves the large intestine, so ulcerative colitis, and if Crohn's disease involves a large portion of the large intestine or Crohn's colitis, unfortunately, that too puts you at increased risk. So oftentimes, those people are screened more frequently and earlier than age 45.
So one of the again, another reason why it was so important to have Dr. Balzora with us today is to talk about this dramatic increase in colorectal cancer cases for people under the age of 50. I'm
Mhm.
just curious anecdotally, and then we'll talk about the theories about why this is happening. But anecdotally, I would love to talk to you, Sophie, about are you seeing younger and younger people? And the only reason I want you to talk about this, it is so upsetting when
Yeah.
we hear about these cases. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually I was on a webinar last night, we were talking about just this, is that it's more than anecdotal, right? It's more than just a phenomenon, it is something that we're seeing time and time again, it's something that's in the literature, and of course, we're seeing, people that we know very well, that we've seen on TV, that have been our heroes,
Like
and
James Vanderbeek, who recently passed
exactly.
away.
Yep, James Vanderbeek, of course, Chadwick Boseman, who has been a hero to so many, James Casey, who was an acclaimed, musician who unfortunately passed, um, quite young from colorectal cancer. And so, it's sad for so many reasons. Of course, cancer is just a terrible disease across the board. But I think, especially in young folks, because we know they're getting diagnosed at later stages when it's eventually found, which means, like I said before, chance of survival at 5 years, unfortunately, is much lower at later stages compared to people who are diagnosed quite early. And I think the other thing is, like you alluded to before, just because you're otherwise healthy, just because you have no family history, doesn't make you immune to colorectal cancer. And so I think for that reason, when you see young people who do have digestive symptoms, right, whether it's blood in the stool, belly pain they couldn't explain, weight loss that they couldn't explain why that happened, or
Fatigue.
fatigue, exactly, unexplained fatigue that they may write off as something else. Like, it's very easy to dismiss symptoms, particularly if you're otherwise healthy. And I think, when there's an opportunity to see your primary care physician, if you even have one, because a lot of people actually don't have, regular primary care, then they slip through the cracks, or their symptoms are dismissed. And so that's why, the fact that we're doing this today is so incredible. The fact that we have to bring awareness outside of the month of March, because a lot of times I think, people have opportunities to seek care, or people have opportunities to have these symptoms known, and it just doesn't make it to the next step. They don't get to me, or they don't get to me early enough for the diagnosis to be made. Um, and then that's just really unfortunate when you have that opportunity and it's missed.
Definitely. And it's heartbreaking. I know of a 32-year-old young man who has stage 4 colorectal cancer. I talked to an oncology fellow at Montefiore who said that she had to tell a 21-year-old
Mhm.
Sophie, a 21-year-old college student, that he had stage 4 colon cancer. And it's really so upsetting
Mm.
that it's upsetting when anyone faces this diagnosis, but young people sort of with their whole lives ahead of them. Um, and what's upsetting, we'll talk about why this is happening in a second. But upsetting to me, Sophie, is like if you're under the age of 45, that's when the screening recommendations are. So,
Yeah.
and I remember thinking, oh, well, Jay was too young to get screened.
Well,
Well,
yeah.
why was he too young to get screened? And why can't there be better screening protocols. I know that like with the risk reward and the population studies, et cetera,
Mhm.
maybe it's not worth it to screen everyone, but can't we do a better job detecting this early onset colon cancer?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a very important question that we need to answer because when we talk about these, what we call early age onset colorectal cancer, which is colorectal cancer under the age of 50. But, a lot of the stories we're hearing are people who wouldn't qualify for average risk screening anyway.
Right.
So there are a lot of people that we are missing, unfortunately. And like you said, it does have to do with like cost effectiveness and how much, it costs to screen versus how many people you're catching with this disease. But unfortunately, I do think this is just the beginning. It was really thought of as an older person disease for a really long time. And that's, I think, the reason why people were very dismissive of symptoms in younger folks. But just seeing this huge slope, 1 in 5 colorectal cancer diagnoses now are people under the age of 55.
Wow.
That's a big percentage of folks. So, it remains to be seen if they will lower the screening age again. I think that I'm really curious to see that, just knowing how the trends are right now. But I think what's most important is knowing that the screening age is 45 and there are a lot of people that we're missing. This is a conversation that should be started when people are 40, right? Just starting to plant the seed. It's almost time for your colorectal cancer screening. It's just around the corner. It'll be here before you know it. Because even if you're seeing people at 46, 47, 48, and they're doing what they need to do, they're still not starting screening when they should, and those cancers can be missed.
Right. And Carol Nicholson is asking, why can't Cologuard be done on a large population? Still have to do prep. Well, you don't have to do prep in Cologuard. You just have to poop in a box, everyone.
Right.
But if a polyp's found, then Cologuard finds large polyps, and I think that they have Cologuard Plus now because I
Right.
work with Cologuard, and they've gotten much better at
Mhm.
detecting colon cancer and even cancerous polyps, which is much better than advanced colon cancer,
Exactly.
obviously. But why a Cologuard can't be prescribed by a doctor to anyone under the age of 45, right, Sophie?
That's correct. So that brings up a good point about different screening tests. So Cologuard came out with a new test in 2025 called Cologuard Plus. So it's kind of an upgraded version of their previous iteration, and that is for screening purposes for people who are of average risk. So people who have no family history of colorectal cancer, people who don't have inflammatory bowel disease, like we said earlier, Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, or some of those genetic syndromes that increase folks' risk for early onset colorectal cancer and other cancers. So if you don't fall into those categories, Cologuard is an option for you. And so with Cologuard Plus, not only is it better at detecting colorectal cancer than the original version had been, but also it can detect those larger polyps, the polyps that are more likely to become colorectal cancer if someone doesn't get screened. So we call those advanced adenomas, or those types of colorectal cancer, those precancerous polyps that are more likely to become something troublesome down the line. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, coverage for something where you're not of age is going to be a challenge. But again, it remains to be seen. It may be because it was the screening age was 50 for quite some time
Right.
before it moved down to 45. But who knows? Maybe it will move down further, at a much quicker rate based off of the numbers that we see.
Or maybe they'll start perfecting and improving these liquid biopsies, these blood tests that could maybe work. But that's really in the future, I guess. A lot
Yeah.
of those aren't quite ready for prime time.
That's right, that's right. But yeah, I mean, I can't be supportive enough about colorectal cancer screening, because, you think about it's important to address people's fears, right? It's important to understand the why people don't get screened, and some people say life gets in the way, which is understandable. Access is a big deal, but there's also fear, and I do wanna I do wanna legitimize that, but I also want to put into context that the fear of not getting screened and
Ah,
and and
believe me.
right? So, whatever you're scared about, there will be bigger fears to face, unfortunately, if we try to avoid screening for those reasons. And colorectal cancer is common. It's a common cancer, but it's highly preventable in the majority of folks when they get screened at the right age.
I want to address the question from earlier in our conversation. Of course, this is something I've been obsessed over or
Mhm.
obsessed about, which is why?
Yeah.
Why are we seeing so many more cases of colorectal cancer in young people under the age of 50, but also, yes, early 40s, 30s, even 20s? And these are people with no family history, none of the sort of illnesses that might increase their risk, right? Why? Okay, I know about the theories, but you're the expert, so tell us.
Do you want me to go first? It's really all about inflammation, right? It's this kind of pro-inflammatory state in the body that is thought to be um, the main one of the main drivers of cancer. So when we think about the obesity epidemic and obesity in general, um, there are some kind of trends that follow along with that when you think about cancer. And so what has been seen is like things like processed meats, right? Highly processed foods. There's a tie to that with colorectal cancer, unfortunately.
What
Um,
what are these what are these foods doing to our like guts and to our microbiomes, which is sort of the the interior lining of our whole digestive tract, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, and some people ask like, "Oh, is there a tie between the microbiome and cancer?" There is, and a lot of that is related to environmental factors, right? When you think about the American diet and the foods that we're eating, and how even internationally, how a lot of diets have become Americanized. There's a lot of packaged food. There's a lot of processed meats. You think about the um, the environmental toxins that surround us. That does play a role. So it's hard to pinpoint one exact thing, but when you think about things that are in your control to try to decrease your risk of colorectal cancer, which is what we call modifiable risk factors, that has to do with stopping smoking. Right? We talk about limiting alcohol consumption. We talk about minimizing red meat consumption, eating a high fiber diet, right? That's rich in like whole grains, fruits, vegetables, not living a sedentary lifestyle and being quite active. All of those things move away from a pro-inflammatory state to a more healthy lifestyle.
But do you
But
think there are other things? Because, oh, that's interesting. Someone just asking Karen O'Shannon, my friend, do long-term strong antibiotics play into a risk? Because I know, Bert Diaz, Louis Diaz from Memorial Sloan Kettering, right? He did
Mhm.
that whole trial on that subset of people who have rectal cancer with, and it was very successful. I think they were treated with a targeted therapy and survived the disease. But I remember Dr. Diaz, I did a panel with him, and he was talking about potentially as one factor, an overprescription of antibiotics, that somehow those are getting rid of the good bacteria
Mhm.
as well as the bad bacteria.
Mhm.
What do you think of that theory?
Yeah, I mean, and we see the same thing with these associations with inflammatory bowel disease, right? So, in general, just like in life, we like a diverse set of bacteria, as opposed to one specific kind or just like a lack of diversity. And so, I think that that does play into it. If there is a concern if people are being exposed to antibiotics more often than the person next to them, do they have a higher risk of certain types of cancer? So I think that is definitely an interesting question. I think that that definitely can play a role, but it does remain to be seen, and I think it's hard to tease out what has more impact. What thing has.
Right. It could be a whole confluence of things. Also, people, I thought it was interesting, again, I've been obsessed with this. So there are also thoughts about forever chemicals,
Mm,
like PFASs that are all around us, that maybe that is increasing the risk. I was at the Stand Up to Cancer Scientific Summit, and 17 cancers are on the rise in people under the age of 50, Sophie, which you probably
yeah.
knew. But so they're really trying to tease out like why this is happening. And I don't know. I'm not sure ultra processed foods alone can really explain it. I'm not a
No.
doctor, but it
Yeah.
just seems like there are a lot of factors. Another thing they're looking at is microplastics.
Hmm.
That microplastics in our diet could be messing up our biome. And they're starting to find microplastics in brain tissue, in fetuses.
Yeah.
Um, and it seems like we have no idea how much microplastics we're actually ingesting on a
Mhm.
regular basis. So, what do you think of that theory? I'm curious if people in your field are talking about that.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting one. I don't think we know enough, but I mean, you can't deny that there has to be a series of environmental factors and toxins that unfortunately a generation has been exposed to that their predecessors have not, which is causing this rise. Like it just, I mean, genetics obviously plays an important role. And like I said, there are some things that are out of our control, but we have to think that there are some environmental toxins that are contributing to these rates. It's like we don't know exactly again the degree of impact on each individual factor, but it's undeniable that that has to play a role.
And wait, I'm going to get Melissa says, why do physicians still prescribe clindamycin when it creates a C. diff infection? I was a clinical microbiologist. See how smart my people are at a state lab in Texas. Okay,
Mhm.
answer. Can you answer Melissa's question?
I can say that the practice generally is to prescribe antibiotics when they're necessary. And I think the bigger message is that we need to limit the use of them, in unnecessary situations. So for viral infections, right, for colds, for those sorts of things, like antibiotics aren't necessary. And I think that sometimes there is a propensity to prescribe them when they may not be needed. But I think that there still is a role for clindamycin in general, and there are other antibiotics too that unfortunately can increase your risk of this infection that you're talking about, C. difficile, that affects the large intestine, and could be quite taxing on the body. But all is to say that yes, antibiotics may have a role, particularly when pediatric populations are exposed to them. But antibiotics do still have an important role in general.
Yeah, and the other thing I heard at the Stand Up to Cancer from one expert was, you know, they're looking at screen time and if it's affecting our
Mm.
circadian rhythms, and somehow that is increasing the risk. I don't know if that is like pie in the sky or if there's any legitimacy, but it's certainly worth studying, right? Because there seems to be something happening that is different now.
Oh yeah. I mean, I wonder. You wonder what if it's an association, not necessarily causation, but perhaps that group of people, perhaps they're eating later at night, maybe less sleep contributes to weight gain or more sedentary lifestyle during the day.
Right.
Like what are the factors that are causing this association? So we'll see what happens. I mean, I think there's a lot of different things to look at. Our environment and society is so different than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. There's just so many things to look at, but I mean,
And I
like.
know. And what's frustrating is
Mhm.
epidemiological studies are so hard to do, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there now I feel like almost every major medical center has an early onset colorectal cancer department and experts dealing with this rise. And yet I'm so frustrated that it's so difficult to
Yeah,
really
pin it
have
down.
anything more than theories. I know JAMA published that report by the doctor at Dana-Farber or at Mass General in November about ultra-processed foods.
Yeah,
But I it's so frustrating that it's gonna take a really long time
well,
to
that's the thing.
determine why
It
this is
long time.
happening.
Takes a long time to then look back, and, the rates are going to increase if more people don't get screened or if it starts affecting people even more who are under the screening age while those studies are being done, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, what would be your parting message to everybody
Mhm.
listening? And then I'll give mine because I'm like the nagging fishwife of colorectal cancer.
Well, they don't have the Katie Couric effect for nothing, but, I will say primarily listen to your body, right? That is the most important message. It doesn't matter what age you are. Unfortunately, colorectal cancer can happen at any age. So blood in the stool is never normal. It doesn't mean that it's colorectal cancer, but it is never normal and should always be mentioned to a healthcare professional. If you have increasing fatigue, belly pain you can't explain, a change in your stool consistency, used to be a 1 a dayer, now you're a 3 a dayer and it's explosive, or you're going much less frequently than you used to, right? All of those things, should not be dismissed. You should bring them to the attention of a healthcare professional. Doesn't matter what age you are. And then for those people who are of age, absolutely talk to your doctor about getting screened. Talk to your doctor about any fears you have. And then the third thing I want to say is that family secrets help no one. Family secrets can be deadly, right? Share your family history when you are together. It is not something to be shy about. You really can save a loved one's life by knowing each other's family history, knowing that you should get screened earlier potentially. It's not something that should be hush hush. It's not something that should be stigmatized. It's really time to bring these things out into the forefront, because when you find out too late and there was something you can do to change the tide, that's really upsetting and disappointing.
But not only talking about family history, but genetic testing can be really helpful when it
Yeah.
comes to diagnosing cancer early, because it can really just influence, your frequency of getting screened. I have a I have a gene mutation, Sophie, that puts me at a slightly higher risk of colorectal cancer,
Mm.
which comes from my mom's side of the family. They were Ashkenazi Jews, and that increases my risk slightly, which makes me say to my daughters, it's really, really important because your father got colorectal cancer, your mother has a slightly
Mhm.
higher risk.
Mhm.
And and so people really need to get genetic testing to help them kind of just figure out their screening
Frequency.
cadence.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to add to your very smart parting thoughts was, well, two things. So, people hear blood in their stools. I
Mhm.
know this is like TMI, isn't it? I hope
No,
everyone enjoys
that's not.
everyone enjoys their dinner tonight. But sometimes it can mean your stools are just darker, like
Mm.
they've changed colors. So you're not
Mhm.
necessarily going to see blood in the toilet bowl, but that's why they call it fecal occult blood, right? It's hidden. And so if your stool color is really dark or black, it could be because blood is in there, right?
So yes, I'll say, what we worry about is black stool, or obviously maroon stool, or bright red blood. So black stool is just an indication that the blood is digested. So usually, if you have blood in the stool that is coming from the stomach or the upper gastrointestinal tract, it will be black, but it will also be sticky. It usually smells a certain way, right? Which is not so good. So that's different from, let's say, people who are taking iron supplements and their stool can be black, but it's formed. It's a very different consistency. Pepto-Bismol is another one that can turn your stool black. So oftentimes, when people are complaining of black stool, we ask them those questions. But when the stool is black, and it's because there's blood in it, it's usually a very sticky consistency. Sometimes we call it tarry. Um, and that brings me to another point, is that when we talk about blood in the stool, that also means blood on the toilet paper. That also means blood in the bowl, right? Again, it's never normal. It doesn't always mean colorectal cancer, but it does require further evaluation.
And sometimes I think too many doctors say, "Oh, don't worry, it's hemorrhoids."
Exactly.
And you really
Yep.
need a doctor, especially given the statistics that we've been discussing, who will at least accept that there is a potential
Exactly.
of
Yep.
colorectal cancer, and that you can't necessarily be cavalier about it. The final thing I wanted to say is because Black people have a higher incidence and mortality rate. And
Mhm.
since you are president of the American Association of Black Gastroenterologists and Hepatologists, um, there are a lot of disparities in access, Sophie,
Mhm.
which is heartbreaking. And in so many ways, we have a caste system when it comes to healthcare in this country. What can be done to improve access in underserved communities and to really make sure that everyone knows, no matter what color they are, that they need to get screened for this disease? Are we making any progress in that department?
I think we are, because screening is so important. I think also lowering the age does capture more people. I think increasing awareness is really key, and also having those conversations with people who refer to us, right? So I think it does start with the primary care provider as well. And so I think all of these things are important. I mean, I think screening rates could definitely be improved in certain populations, but as it relates to Black Americans, thankfully, those screening rates have improved compared to prior numbers. But I think for our Hispanic populations, our Asian American populations, there are more efforts that are necessary to get those screening rates comparable to their white counterparts.
Yeah, and I think we just have to do much more community outreach,
Yeah.
and I know Exact Sciences, who I work with, and a lot of hospitals are really trying to reach out to these communities and make sure, we increase awareness among
Mhm.
all Americans,
Yep.
and people,
And
especially people who are at higher risk, of this disease. Well, Sophie, thank you for doing this.
thank you
You
for
know,
having
I
me.
I could talk about this. I'm passionate about saving lives through
Mhm.
information, and knowledge really is power. And I think Everybody Poops is the name of a children's book, right?
Yes.
And I
Yes.
always think everybody poops. Most everyone has a colon. There are a few people who don't, have had to have their colons removed. But we have to destigmatize
Mhm.
this conversation
Mhm.
because it is such a deadly cancer. But the beauty of it is the colon is like Jimmy Dean's sausage casing, right? You you it no it if you get it early, it won't be systemic. It won't go all over your
Yeah.
body. The
Exactly.
colon keeps it localized.
Right.
And if you catch it early and remove the polyp and it doesn't permeate the colon wall through the lymph nodes and then become, a systemic problem, your life can be saved. And
Yeah.
so you really I know everyone's telling me, stop. I am sick in the
Oh,
head. We have to go.
oh,
Everyone's telling my team is yelling at me.
oh. But no, but it's an important last message. It really is preventable in the majority of folks when they're screened at the right age. But everybody who has a colon is at risk. So please, please, please get screened. Thank you so much for everything that you do to fight the good fight against colorectal cancer. It's so
Well,
necessary.
thank you, because you're in the trenches of it every day. So, Sophie Balzora, thank you. And I'll see you guys when I have my hour with the Bulwark folks in less than an hour. Bye, Sophie.
Bye.
Thank you.